Have you ever wondered if someone is secretly in love with you even before they realize it themselves? Imagine a man who looks away just a fraction too late, whose laugh carries a nervous tremor, whose silence seems heavier than words. What if those subtle cues are not coincidences, but signals from the unconscious signs that reveal a deeper truth he cannot yet speak aloud? This paradox between denial and revelation is precisely where the psychology of Carl Jung becomes indispensable. Human behavior is rarely transparent. What we consciously say often disguises what the unconscious insists on communicating. Jung described this as the interplay between the ego, which wants control, and the unconscious, which refuses to be silenced. Love, especially unacknowledged love, embodies this conflict. On the surface, it may look like indifference or even avoidance. Beneath, however, runs an invisible current of attraction that escapes in gestures, slips of the tongue, and nervous laughter. To recognize these signals is to listen not to words but to the soul's language. Consider the story of Clara, a young psychologist who believed her connection with her colleague Matteo was purely professional. She repeated this conviction often, almost as if rehearsing it for herself, yet those around her sensed a hidden tension. Jung would have called this a projection of the unconscious, where what is denied consciously resurfaces symbolically. One day, when teased about Matteo's supposed feelings, Clara burst into an unguarded laugh, an involuntary reaction that betrayed an unspoken truth. Why did she laugh? Because part of her recognized the possibility, even as her rational mind resisted it. This is what Jung meant when he said the unconscious reveals itself in slips and unexpected reactions. The essence of these signals is contradiction. A man who avoids speaking to you may simultaneously linger with his gaze. He may downplay your connection in the public, but overreact when someone criticizes you. These paradoxes are not random. They arise from the tension between what the soul knows and what the ego fears. Jung called this dynamic the shadow, the parts of ourselves we suppress because they make us vulnerable. Unacknowledged love belongs to this shadow. It frightens because to admit it means surrendering control. This is why body language becomes the clearest evidence. Words can lie, but the body resists deception. When a man's voice softens as he speaks to you, when his posture subtly shifts in your presence, when his silence grows charged with meaning, these are unconscious disclosures. They reflect what Jung termed archetypal resonance, where deeper truths surface not through rational confession, but through symbols and micro-behaviors. The unconscious is economical. It will find any available crack to express itself. The first great sign, then, is the dissonance between appearance and essence. When his actions contradict his statements, when discomfort and attraction coexist, you are witnessing unconscious love. This recognition is not imagination, but perception, your unconscious attuning to his. Jung insisted that the meeting of two personalities is like a chemical reaction. If any connection occurs, both are transformed. The tremor you sense in such moments is not fantasy. It is evidence of transformation already beginning. To understand why these unconscious signs carry such weight, we must revisit Jung's concept of projection. Projection occurs when an individual attributes inner experiences, feelings, desires, fears onto another person without realizing it. In the context of love, projection often manifests as contradictions. A man may distance himself precisely because his attraction is overwhelming. He may dismiss or minimize the connection in words, but his body betrays him when you enter the room. This paradox is not indifference. It is the psyche's defense against vulnerability. Clara observed this paradox clearly. After the nervous laughter incident, Matteo's behavior shifted. He began to avoid her, engaging less in conversation, sometimes appearing cold. On the surface, this looked like rejection. But Jung's lens suggests otherwise. The unconscious resists direct acknowledgement, so it creates defensive maneuvers. One of the most common is withdrawal, what we can call the paradoxical retreat. The paradox is that the deeper the affection, the stronger the impulse to retreat. This retreat does not erase the feeling. It intensifies it by keeping it unresolved. Yet when Clara was criticized by a colleague during a professional meeting, Matteo's response betrayed his true emotions. He defended her with a passion disproportionate to the situation. Such intensity revealed his deeper concern. Here we see Jung's principle in action. What the ego denies, the unconscious reveals in moments of emotional urgency. Love hidden in the shadow cannot help but surge forward when the beloved is threatened. In this moment, his behavior spoke more loudly than any declaration could. This illustrates the second key sign, protective intensity. A man may withdraw, but if he cannot stand to see you hurt, his soul has already chosen, even if his conscious mind has not. The contradiction distance in daily interactions, yet fierce defense in moments of conflict, is a hallmark of unconscious love. No colleague defends another with such vehemence, unless the bond transcends professionalism. Jung would argue that the unconscious has already cast its vote. The ego simply lags behind. The third sign, which Jung described as symbolic eruption, is when the unconscious begins to express itself through symbols, dreams, and indirect speech. Clara experienced this when she learned from a mutual friend that Matteo often mentioned her in conversations, dismissing her as complicated, while his eyes betrayed fascination. His language contradicted itself, yet the repetition of her presence in his dialogue revealed an obsession he could not suppress. Jung explained that when truth cannot be admitted directly, it appears symbolically clothed in contradictions. A dream, a careless remark, an unconscious habit of mentioning someone's name. These are symbolic eruptions where the unconscious refuses silence. These patterns may sound abstract, but they are profoundly practical. If you observe a man retreating yet still defending you, avoiding you yet speaking of you, dismissing you yet lingering in his gaze, you are not imagining the contradiction. You are witnessing the unconscious at work, and the unconscious, unlike the ego, does not deceive. It reveals through paradox. To grasp the deeper meaning of these paradoxes, we must recognize that unconscious love is not merely a private feeling. It is a force that transforms both individuals involved. Jung often emphasized that encounters of this kind act as catalysts for individuation, the process through which a person becomes more whole and self-aware. Love that is hidden, denied, or only half-acknowledged functions like an alchemical fire. It burns away layers of ego resistance and illusion, exposing vulnerabilities that both terrify and liberate. Clara's experience illustrates this dynamic. As her connection with Matteo grew more ambiguous, she began to notice her own reactions shifting. She oscillated between joy and anxiety, hope and despair. Jung would argue that this oscillation signals a collision between the conscious and the unconscious. When one person awakens the anima or animus in another, the archetypal image of the inner feminine or masculine something profound occurs. The individual does not simply feel attracted. They are confronted with a mirror of their own unintegrated psyche. Clara was not only responding to Matteo as a man, but also to what he symbolized within her, the unresolved desire to be seen chosen and valued. This explains why such encounters often feel fated. Jung described them as synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that defy logical explanation. A nervous laugh, an unguarded glance, a recurring dream, these moments accumulate until they form a pattern too striking to ignore. When Clara dreamed of the man writing in a notebook that read, "Do not say it yet," she was not simply experiencing random imagery. Dreams, Jung argued, are the royal road to the unconscious. They reveal truths the conscious mind cannot yet handle. In that dream, Clara's psyche recognized Matteo's silence as both a barrier and a message. He was not ready, but the bond existed nonetheless. It is crucial to understand that such unconscious bonds are not always meant to result in conventional relationships. Sometimes they function as messengers. A man who cannot declare his love may still serve as the catalyst for a woman to confront her own wounds. Clara eventually realized that Matteo represented not only affection, but also the echo of her childhood longing to be chosen and affirmed. This recognition shifted the focus inward. Instead of demanding a confession from him, she began to ask herself, why did I need him to declare what I already felt? What within me still seeks validation outside of myself? This pivot marks the true gift of unconscious love. It forces us to examine the parts of ourselves we project onto others. By identifying what we have placed in another, be it wisdom, light, or love, we reclaim those qualities as our own. Jung believed this integration was essential for growth. Without it, we remain trapped in cycles of projection, mistaking others for the source of our power. With it, we awaken to the realization that what we admire in them often reflects what is dormant within us. The transformative power of unconscious love lies in its ability to awaken both light and shadow. When we meet someone who stirs us at this level, we do not only experience affection, we are also confronted with our hidden wounds. Jung insisted that love, when it touches the soul, is never neutral. It destabilizes. It tears open defenses and compels us to face the very aspects of ourselves we most resist. That is why such connections can feel both intoxicating and painful. Clara discovered this duality. After encounters with Matteo, she often felt a mix of exhilaration and emptiness. This confusion was not evidence of failure. It was evidence of initiation. Jung described this process as an alchemy of the psyche, where opposites joy and sorrow, attraction and fear collide, generating heat and transformation. To love unconsciously is to step into a crucible. The ego protests, but the soul insists on growth. Clara realized that her longing for Matteo's declaration was not just about him. It was about her history of wanting to be chosen, her unresolved fear of invisibility. Matteo's silence forced her to hear her own voice more clearly. This is the paradox. The man who cannot confess his love may nonetheless serve as the greatest teacher. He becomes a mirror, reflecting your unhealed places. If you only look outward, waiting for his admission, you remain bound to his silence. But if you turn inward, asking why his presence unsettles you so deeply, you discover the archetypal function he plays. He is not merely a colleague or a potential partner. He is a symbol, a messenger from your unconscious revealing what you must integrate. Jung warned that what is not made conscious appears as fate. In relationships, this means that unresolved projections can trap us in repetitive cycles. We may chase unavailable partners, seek external validation, or misinterpret mixed signals as personal rejection. Yet the truth is subtler. The unconscious compels us toward these encounters precisely to show us what remains unclaimed within ourselves. If you feel drawn to a man who seems half present, half absent, it is not only about his ambivalence. It is also about your readiness to confront the parts of yourself that yearn for recognition. Clara eventually shifted her focus. Instead of waiting for Matteo to awaken, she began writing in her journal. She explored her childhood memories, her patterns of attraction, her habit of idealizing those who kept their distance. This act of reflection was not about dismissing Matteo, but about reclaiming her own power. She discovered that his role was less about offering her love and more about triggering her journey towards self-love. This realization freed her. When she stopped chasing his acknowledgement, she found peace. Ironically, it was then that Mateo reappeared less fearful and more open because her energy had changed. Jung would say the alchemical transformation within her had shifted the entire dynamic. Thus, the real question is not whether he will confess, but whether you will claim what this connection reveals about you. When love remains unspoken, it can feel like an unfinished story, a sentence left hanging in the air. Yet Jung teaches us that the true completion of such a story does not depend on the other person's words, but on your willingness to integrate the experience into your own growth. Silence does not mean absence of meaning. In fact, it is often in the silence where the soul speaks most clearly. Clara's journey demonstrates this truth. When Mateo never fully articulated his feelings, she could have remained trapped in endless waiting, hoping that one day he would confirm what her intuition already knew. Instead, she chose to see his presence as symbolic. He was not just a man who withheld affection. He was a messenger of her own awakening. By embracing this perspective, she released her dependency on his recognition and stepped into her own. That was the true revelation. The love she sought outside had already been germinating within. This shift is what transforms unconscious love from suffering into wisdom. If you recognize yourself in this story, the invitation is not to demand answers from the other, but to listen to the questions rising within you. Why did this encounter shake me? What does it reveal about my longing, my shadow, my capacity to love? These are the questions that transmute unspoken love into conscious evolution. When answered honestly, they allow you to close the cycle without bitterness, carrying forward the essence of the connection as strength, not as wound. The final message is simple yet profound. You do not need someone else to declare your worth for it to exist. Their silence may have triggered your awakening, but it is your voice that completes it. Choose yourself again and again, and the love you once projected outward will become the love that sustains you.